put the cart before the horse. Well, you end up getting nowhere, and progress can be like pushing the proverbial ball uphill. It's an easy trap to fall into, and one that could send your business down the gurgler. Welcome to Scaling for Success. We're all about helping businesses grow profitably, scale and move to the next level. If you're looking for consultancy and mentorship that really makes a difference, subscribe to our channel or visit the Scaling Management Consulting Group website. Links in the description below. In today's video, we're discussing why businesses that do this one short-term thing go out of business. At this point, we know what you're thinking and that you're about to clock off mentally with the notion that this couldn't possibly happen to you and your business. How can one short-term decision affect the longevity of a company's operation? There's actually an idiom for corporate impatience. It's called short-termism. It's not one decision per se, but a mindset of wanting and needing results right here, right now in the present, and the inability to look to the horizon and play the long game. This phenomenon is completely understandable, though, given the immense pressures from shareholders to start filling the coffers as quickly as possible and really up that turnover in revenue. Now let's cast our minds back a little bit to 5 years ago. There was no global pandemic, life was good, the world was your oyster so long as you were prepared to put the hard yards in to get there. 2017 was a bumper year for market growth. The S&P was up 18% year over year and the Dow 19%. Externally, everything was looking great. The reality, though, was that average quarterly profits among companies had really only increased by around 5% over the previous 5 years. Now that's a stark contrast to the investor's valuation of those same profits. In terms of earnings per share, value had increased by 59%. But why such a valley between those two numbers? The answer? Short-termism. Actual profits were creeping upwards at a snail's pace because of a cosmic shift in business ideology. And that is, decades of focusing on quarterly profits as the main measure of business success, instead of investing and on innovations that would reap rewards over the longevity of a business. With the huge hits to the market in recent years from interrupted international trade and general market uncertainty, the hangover from short-termism is obvious. Rather than looking at the big picture, there is actually more pressure from investors to see impressive quarterly figures and less desire to put the systems and offerings in place for a business to prosper in years to come. The relationship between short-termism and innovation is well documented. And there's actually a metric out there. It's called the research quotient, or RQ. Basically, it puts a dollar value on the return on investment for any funds dedicated to research and development of a product or service. Investors are looking for their money to work. They don't want to be sold on a dream. They want more bang for their buck, a lower cost per share, eventuating in higher gross earnings based on owned share numbers alone. The vicious cycle is completed when an investor applies a higher discount rate to companies that have a more short-term business plan, meaning that they have to come up with substantially more capital to get up and running. Those with a more long-term plan and later expectancy of return on investment actually have a lower cost of initial capital, meaning they can afford to focus a little more on the innovation side of things. Efforts to combat short-termism ultimately harm companies with that mindset. Attempting to alter CEO behavior and decision-making through incentives to push for more innovation projects is a plan that has a couple of holes in it when you consider a few trends over recent decades. Now, historically, promotions to upper management, and more importantly, of upper management of CEO and COO roles, was something that was handled internally, right? You paid your dues, you proved your worth, and eventually you would climb that corporate ladder to the very top if you were dedicated and good enough. From the 1980s to the late 2000s, the figures, however, told a different story. a preference to hire externally for top jobs in lieu of internal promotions of key personnel that knew a business back, front, inside, and out. Companies hiring outside CEOs went from 12% to 39%, unsurprisingly bringing in a successful CEO from another company operating in a different facet of the market brought with it skill sets that favored earning profits as a priority over playing for the long game. Now, in the same time period, there was a change in the decentralization of R&D in general. Funds were allocated more towards the development side of things and less on the research side. R&D was now looked at as a cost rather than a metric associated with growth as a company. Let's take General Electric as an example for a moment. They made just about everything and were heavyweights and market leaders in appliances, electronic circuitry, aerospace, among many other things. The decision was made to hire an outside CEO, and all of a sudden the game plan changed. Stepping out of R&D space of developing products and technology in-house and instead acquiring businesses that weren't hinged on any R&D. The thought process was that it was cheaper to buy companies and own their technology than to do it themselves. The causes of this short-termism was the focus on the quarterly profit margin as a key sign of business health, of being held to ransom by investors with almost unachievable expectations of gross profits. The upward trends of hiring outside CEOs and the purchase of other companies as a means of acquiring technology instead of developing it. Unsurprisingly, the solution to short-termism is to do the exact opposite. Most business accountants look at R&D as an expense, so the answer is to separate it from current profits and instead look at it as how it affects or increases the company value in the long term. Promote from within and hand someone the top job who's been in the trenches, fought tooth and nail during both the pre- and post-growth phases undergone by the company. Someone who sees the value in researching custom products or technologies that will catapult a company into the stratosphere in years to come with enough investment and time, of course. Now, there's only ever been one Steve Jobs, and his business acumen can be summed up in one quote. A lot of times, people don't know what they want until you show it to them. Now, after co-founding Apple Computers, he left the company to pursue other interests with newly coined Next Company, whose biggest achievement was perhaps the merger with animation industry juggernaut Pixar. A decade later, and Apple acquired Next. 4 years later, Jobs is back in the driver's seat as Apple CEO. The very next year, Apple announced the release of the iPod, arguably one of the most important consumer products of the past quarter century, and ultimately the savior for this company. This would be the launching platform for the iPhone, a smart device that has changed the way in which human beings communicate, and one that has spawned a whole crop of manufacturing companies who developed their own smartphones to offer the market. Do you see the pattern here? Bringing the Apple company back to its innovative roots was the catalyst for remarkably fast and thus far sustained growth into one of the world's largest companies. So what's the lesson in all of this for us humble business owners? It's really simple. If you want to start a business and stay in business for the long term, you have to adopt a long-term mentality. Focus on developing your own products and services, finding the right investors that can be sold on the dream and that won't pressure you into cutting corners to bump up that quarterly report. Last but not least, nobody knows your business better than those who are working there day in and day out. External hiring is great for bringing in new energy and fresh ideas to a company, but there is a lot to be said about placing homegrown talent into key positions in the company structure. Well, that's all we have time for in today's video, why businesses that do this one short-term thing go out of business.
Like this video if you found it helpful. And for more content just like this, subscribe to our channel or visit the Scaling Management Consultant Group website at scalinggrp.com or our new website at scalingresources.com.